Well, hey guys, it's Darwin, and I'm officially back from my two big summer adventures, a 400-mile through hike and pack rafting trip in the gates of the Arctic up in Alaska, back to back with an 800-mile bikepacking odyssey through Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan in Central Asia. And today, I want to share with you some of my favorite gear of the year. Not just from these two big adventures, but everything in 2025 so far. I had a pretty action-packed winter and spring, got out on a ton of different trips, and after over 1,000 miles of putting a lot of this stuff through the test, I feel like I can give a pretty good opinion about it. I know it's not the end of 2025 yet, but as far as big adventures go for the year, I'm pretty much done with travels. I just got a few small adventures, and I don't think that I'm going to get anything new. So some of this gear are prototypes that I've been using for a while and have eventually come out. Some of it is some old gear from my past that I've recently put back in my kit, and some of it was brand new to me on some of these adventures, but absolutely surprised the hell out of me, and all of it has made my list of favorite gear for the year. All right, so to start off, let's talk about the first piece, which I've known about for quite some time, actually a couple years of its development. I got a prototype back in early spring, and I've gotten a couple versions of it since, taken it to Alaska, taken it to Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and fallen in love with it, and that is the Canuck Through Bottle. So, if you have ever met Gilad, the owner of Canuck Outdoors, which I've known him for years, and you've talked to him over the past couple years, you've probably heard about this bottle, an absolute passion project of Gilad, and it was awesome to finally see it come out. I've been using Canuck products for years, from the Vecto, the water bladder that I started using back in like 2017 and have used a version of it ever since, to using some of their smaller flask. Well, something that Gilad and Canuck was always obsessed with was making a non-disposable smart water bottle. A smart water bottle that was made out of a better plastic that could hold hot water, that had measurements on the side, and finally they got one out. Over the last couple of years, I think getting into mountaineering and stuff, I've really loved using the classic Nalgene's again. There's just something about having a water bottle that travels with you everywhere, that can handle anything. You can put hot water in it, you can put cold water in it, and you can put stickers on it, and you can give it a life and character and show where it's been. So this is actually one of my early prototypes. So this is the one that I took to Alaska. And as you can see, I've just collected stickers from some of my travels on it. And there's just something about having a water bottle like that lasts forever, that a smart water bottle can't really replace. The top of it has your kind of like regular standard thread on it, so you can use a sport cap, you can use the cap that they have with it, which is like a mini Nalgene cap, or you can thread something like a Sawyer water filter on it. So because this thing just kind of takes two of the bottles that I've been using for years, a Nalgene and a smart water bottle, and kind of combines them into one ultralight reusable bottle. The new Canuck Through Bottle definitely makes my list of favorite gear for this year. All right, so before I get into the next few pieces of gear, I would be remiss if in this list I didn't mention a piece of gear that has become absolutely vital to me over the last couple of years, and that is today's video sponsor, onX Backcountry. I've been using onX Backcountry for the past couple of years, and this year specifically, I used the hell out of it to plan my trip, navigate, stay safe, and stay the course when I was up in Alaska. So I used the onX Backcountry desktop version to completely route out that entire 400-mile adventure. Then I was able to actually save it onto my phone as offline maps and then use it in the field. So not only is it great for planning an adventure and then using it offline, but it also has some really awesome features like the multi-sport feature. So you can actually toggle between hiking, mountain biking, ski touring, climbing, all in one app, which is what makes onX such a great tool to have if you're into all these different backcountry adventures like me. Or using features like the current weather layer, being able to actually pull up and see what the weather is going to be like, where you're going to be camping, or using things like the active wildfire layer or active wildfire smoke layer. I hike a lot in the Southwest, so having those features built into the app makes sure that I can stay safe when I'm in the field and just makes me feel more confident on my trips. So if you guys want to step up your backcountry navigation game and you want to help support my channel, check out my link down in the description box, because right now you can get an onX subscription for 3 months for only $1. So if you've been hearing me talk about it or hear other people talk about it, you've been wanting to try it out, it's $1. $1 for a super awesome, valuable piece of gear that's going to give you more confidence out in the backcountry. So check out that link down below and take advantage of that offer now. I cannot thank onX enough for supporting me, supporting my channel, sponsoring this video, and supporting all of my trips over the past year. All right, the next piece of gear is an oldie but a goodie, and that is a quilt that I used in the past. So if you guys have been watching this channel for years, you'll know that I am a big fan of Enlightened Equipment quilts. I've owned a ton of different ones over the years, and it's what I typically use. Well, back in 2021, I wanted to try something different, so I swapped out my Enlightened Equipment Enigma for a UGQ Bandit. This is the one that I used on the Continental Divide Trail in 2021 for all 3,000 miles. It was a great quilt, and over the last handful of years, I've just kind of went back to using my Enigmas. Well, this year, I decided to swap things out again and use something different, so I picked up my UGQ Bandit 20 and absolutely fell back in love with this quilt. And it's simply because of the design and how they do things like their foot box. I'm a big fan of their foot box. My feet really spread out throughout the night. I have big feet. So their foot box just has a little bit more room than other quilts that I've used in the past. I am super warm in this thing no matter what environment that I'm in. When I was in Tajikistan, we had a night where we camped at 13,000 feet, and this thing kept me super toasty, being only a 20-degree quilt. And this is a long and wide, but with all of my other quilts that I buy from other companies, I typically go long and wide because I'm 6'1" and I roll around a lot when I sleep. I feel like out of all my long and wide quilts, the UGQ Bandit just feels a little bit longer, just feels a little bit wider, which I truly appreciate when I'm out in the field. So because this quilt has, I don't know, shocked me and surprised me like so many years later, 4 years later of using it back in my kit, because I've used this exclusively for all of my trips this year in Alaska and in Central Asia, because it's become a new staple of my kit. The UGQ Bandit 20-degree quilt makes my list of favorite gear of 2025. Hell, it makes my list of favorite gear from the past 5 years, honestly. All right, speaking of sleep system, the next piece of gear that I want to mention is a piece of gear that I have been working on and developing with my gear company, Evolve Supply Co. But the reason it makes my list isn't because it's my piece of gear, it's because it solves a problem that I have had for years of using other products. Again, if you've been following my channel for years, you'll know that I'm a big fan of insulated sleep socks, camp booties. My feet get really cold for some reason when I'm out on the trail. Whether it's warm outside or it's cold outside, I just got bad circulation in my feet. So I've been using some version of an insulated sleep bootie in every single gear loadout for the past 10 years. Actually, the first video ever on my channel, the first gear review that I ever did on my channel, was of the Goose Feet Gear down socks. Well, I used those for years, and then sometime in like 2018, I swapped to the Enlightened Equipment Torrid booties that were a synthetic bootie, which have been great up to this point. But with both of those booties, I've always had one problem, and that is the fact that the inside shell, where your feet actually go inside, are the same material as the outside shell, which is a plasticky 10D or 7D nylon. The issue with that is during the night, your feet can get clammy. Your feet can start sweating if they get too warm, and then because they sweat, they get a little wet, and then by the time the morning rolls around and the temperatures drop, my feet start getting cold again. So I've always had an issue with the inside material of those down booties. Well, about 6 months ago, I started developing and prototyping a version of my own down booties. These are the Evolved booties. And what makes these different from other booties out on the market is, yes, they do have that 10D nylon outer shell. They have a Apex insulation in them, so they're not down, they are synthetic insulation, but the inside of them is made out of an Alpha 90 material. So it's an Alpha direct insulation. If you know anything about Alpha, you'll know that because it has little bitty holes and air pockets in it, it breathes phenomenal. So not only does the Alpha add warmth to these booties, but it also helps for your feet to breathe to where your feet don't sweat. And it has a nice, soft, next to skin feel. So I love all the booties that I've ever used. Again, they've been a staple in my kit for 10 years, but it's always bothered me that at the end of the day, I put my feet next to like a plasticky film material and then my feet feel clammy, then they sweat, then they get cold. That was my goal in designing these. So because this piece of gear is something that I developed, because it's something that has solved a problem of mine and a complaint of mine for 10 years, the new Evolved booty makes my list for the year. All right, the next piece of gear is something that about a year and a half ago I kind of talked shit about in a video, and ever since I have used a lot of, so I'm eating crow on this, and that is an alcohol stove, specifically the Toaks Siphon Titanium alcohol stove. So I made a video where I was saying that I thought that alcohol stoves were kind of stupid, they were a waste. The alcohol stove is one that I would never bring on a long distance hike, and I would definitely leave at home. But funny enough, in 2025, I have needed to use an alcohol stove for a handful of my big adventures, both in Alaska and in Central Asia, mainly because of not being able to get fuel cans out on my trips. So having something like an alcohol stove makes sure that I can burn alcohol just about anywhere, which is a much easier thing to get when you're abroad or you're up in a more remote area. So I picked this thing up in early spring and I've been using it on every adventure since. And this little Toaks Siphon Titanium alcohol stove has made me a believer in alcohol stoves. It's made me change my mind because this thing has just been a joy to use. So I used this both in Alaska for that entire trip and used it in Central Asia for that entire trip. And it was crazy efficient, super simple, ultra light. And yeah, it's just been great. So the system that I built with it was the little stove itself, this Evernew titanium 2-piece stand. So it's just kind of like two little flat pieces, a Toaks titanium windscreen, and then I use my 750 Evolved titanium pot, and this thing has just been great. I have been able to get a full boil on 10 ounces of water with less than a half ounce of alcohol with this little efficient stove. So carrying something like an 8-ounce bottle of alcohol gives me 16 boils, which is pretty damn efficient for an alcohol stove. So because this little thing has just totally exceeded my expectations of an alcohol stove, just because I needed to use it in Alaska and in Central Asia because it was easier to get alcohol than a fuel canister. It definitely makes my list of favorite gear of 2025. All right, the next piece of gear is another oldie but a goodie, something I've added back to my gear kits this year, and that is a down jacket, an ultralight down jacket, specifically the Z-Packs down jacket. So again, if you've been watching my channel for years, you'll know that my go-to insulated jacket used to be a Mount Hardwear Ghost Whisperer. And then sometime in like 2018, I kind of shunned off down jackets and started using synthetic jackets because I wanted to be able to use something whether it was raining or not. Well, truth be told, over the years, I haven't really been hiking in that much rain, in that many wet environments. And over the past 9 months, I've been doing a lot of different types of adventures where I'm carrying a lot of extra gear. So whether it's pack rafting, mountaineering, bike packing, I have my basic gear kit, so sleep system, my shelter, my pack, all of that stuff. But I'm having to add so much extra gear on top of that, like mountaineering gear, a full pack raft, paddle, PFD, all that stuff. So a big goal for me with my typical gear kit has been trying to get it as minimal as far as how much room it takes up in my pack and weight as I can, because I'm adding so much extra weight with this extra gear. So I started thinking about swapping back to a down jacket because down jackets are so much lighter, they pack down so much smaller, so they have a smaller footprint in the pack. So last year I picked up the Z-Packs down jacket, and this thing has been on every adventure with me since and has made me fall back in love with down jackets on the trail. I've used this in the desert, I've used it in high alpine areas, I've used it in the winter, the fall, shoulder season, spring, the summer. Again, I've had this up to right around 14,000 feet, and it's kept me plenty warm. So being 7 ounces and keeping me warm in the middle of the night, close to 14,000 feet, is a big win for me. And just because this thing has kind of made me a convert back to down jackets from synthetic jackets, the Z-Packs Ultralight Down Jacket makes my list of favorite gear for the year. All right, so typically my last piece of gear in these videos is always a tent. It's always a shelter. And as you can see, I have a lot of tents. Over the past year, I have been testing and trying out a ton of new freestanding tents, from a Z-Packs Ultralight DCF freestanding tent to the new Durston X-Dome, different Big Agnes tents to a Nemo tent. I've been trying a lot of freestanding tents because some of the stuff that I'm doing, a freestanding tent is just making more sense to me than a trekking pole tent, because I want more structure. I want it to be better in the wind. I want to be able to set it up, not have a trekking pole, and not have to worry about tension, so not having to stake it down to have a shelter. So I've been on a quest for kind of my perfect ultralight tent, and the tent that I'm putting in this year's list marks off all my boxes of what I'm looking for, and that is the Samaya Instant 2. Now, the name Samaya might be vaguely familiar to you, and that's probably because about a year and a half ago I made a video talking about a $2,000 tent. Why the hell did it cost $2,000 and what was it for? And that was a Samaya tent, specifically a Samaya mountaineering tent. And that's typically what Samaya makes, is mountaineering shelters. Well, over the past year, Samaya has been trying to make more 3-season backpacking, bikepacking tents, and that's where the Instant 2 comes in. So for the trip over to Central Asia, not only was I over there doing this big trip, but I was also testing and shooting media, so photos and video, for certain gear companies while I was shooting a documentary in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, and Samaya was one of those companies, and I decided to try out a prototype of their new tent, the Instant 2. And this thing has pleasantly surprised me of marking off a lot of boxes that I had for a freestanding tent. So I wanted something that packed down super tiny, which this goes down way smaller. This is not fully packed down. Something that had a very small footprint with the poles, because I don't like long poles, which it did. Something that was crazy ultralight. I can't remember the weight off the top of my head, but I'll put it up here or something. And something that was really bomb-proof in the environments, as far as really being able to stand up to high winds and having a ton of room in it. And this thing marked off all of those boxes. What makes this very different from all the other ultralight tents, freestanding tents that I've been trying, is because of its very classic and simple yet sort of unique dome design. Remember when you were a kid, or maybe you have one now, the classic Coleman tents that just had 2 poles and they crossed over each other, making a dome style tent? Well, that's what this does. Aside from it has a offset crossing point. So instead of having the cross at the top, it has it on the side, making it a little more aerodynamic on how you set it up in the wind. Plus, the other side of it, instead of having a dome shape to it, has a flat wall, so it has more headroom for taller people that are 6'1" plus. So a very unique yet classic design. I've had this thing in a bunch of different environments. There were some times where we were up at crazy high elevations up in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, and this thing performed fantastic in the wind. It was bomb-proof in high winds, and it's just comfortable because it has a ton of room on the inside. So after trying out that $2,000 mountaineering tent and thinking it was sort of overpriced for what it was because it didn't have a lot of features, this thing has been a pleasant surprise in using it in the field. And honestly, out of all these freestanding tents, this is at the top of my list of favorite freestanding tents. Now, This is a really expensive tent still. It is made out of DCF, so it has a very high price tag on it. But you know, this is one of those specialty pieces of gear when you're doing something like bike packing 800 miles in different environments over in different countries, and you want something that's gonna have a small footprint on it, that's gonna be crazy ultralight, that's gonna perform in the environments and have a ton of room in it, and feel bomb proof. That is what one of these specialty tents are. So obviously it's got a high price tag on it. But because this thing just surprised me, because it ticked off so many boxes of what I've been looking for in a freestanding tent, the Samaya Instant 2 makes my list of favorite gear of 2025. All right, guys, there you go. That's all my favorite gear from this year so far. Typically I do like 10 pieces of gear, like a top 10. There wasn't really 10 pieces of gear that made my list this year. And all of these pieces of gear made my list not because they were ultra light, not because of the price, not because they were budget or not budget, but because all of these pieces of gear were truly innovative to me, because they were different than other things that I've used in the past and kind of have changed my mind about some of the things that I use. You know, using something like an alcohol stove, I was totally against alcohol stoves, but this little thing made me a believer in alcohol stoves. So because of that, that's why these things made my list of favorite gear of this year. Speaking of that, what's some of your favorite gear from 2025 so far? Leave it down below and let me know your thoughts. Guys, I hope you're doing well. Hope you're taking care of yourselves. I hope you're taking care of each other. I love you. And as always, thanks for watching.